When God is near, the atmosphere changes, the impossible begins to shift, and the miraculous becomes reality. It doesn't always come with thunder or lightning, but when the presence of God draws close, something undeniable stirs in the heart, in the world around us, and deep within our soul. You may not see fire from heaven or hear a booming voice in the sky, but you will feel it, that gentle, powerful assurance that you are not alone. Suddenly, peace that surpasses all understanding floods your spirit, even in the middle of the storm. That is not coincidence, my friend, that is God. When God is near, broken things begin to heal, hearts long shattered begin to mend, hope, once buried under years of disappointment, begins to rise again. That's a miracle. Don't overlook it. The same God who split the sea, who raised the dead, who spoke the universe into existence, he still moves, he still saves, and he's closer than you think. Look around. When your heart softens toward someone who once hurt you, that's a miracle. When you find the strength to forgive, when joy returns after years of sorrow, when light breaks through the darkness, that's God. When you fall to your knees and tears stream down your face because you feel something holy in the room, that's not emotion, that's presence. That's Him. And when God is near, things begin to happen that defy logic. Doors open that no man can shut. Provisions come when the bank account is empty. Healing comes when the doctors say there's no hope. Relationships are restored that seemed forever broken. You see, God doesn't just touch lives, He transforms them. He doesn't just show up, He takes over. But you must be still enough to notice. You must be humble enough to receive. God resists the proud, but He is near to the broken-hearted. He walks with those who are weary. He lifts those who have fallen, and if you open your heart, truly open it not with religious performance, but with childlike faith, you will see Him. You will see the signs, maybe not written in the sky, but etched into the moments of your life. A word spoken at the right time, a stranger's kindness that hits you like an angel in disguise, a deep sense of peace when all logic says you should be panicking, a quiet whisper in your spirit that says, I am here. That's God. Don't wait for perfection. Don't wait until you've cleaned yourself up. Come as you are, because when you come near to Him, He comes near to you. And when He draws near, miraculous signs will follow, not always the ones you expect, but always the ones you need. So if you're looking for a miracle, you don't have to look far. Just look up. Look within. Open your heart, because when God is near, everything changes. When God is near, peace begins to settle into your life in a way that words cannot fully explain. It is not the peace that comes from everything going right or from having all the answers. It is something far deeper, more profound, a peace that surpasses all understanding. This peace does not depend on your circumstances. It's not the result of external calm, but of an internal presence. It is the unmistakable sign that God Himself is near. When this peace comes, it settles in your heart, quiets your fears, and steadies your soul. You could be in the middle of a storm physically, emotionally, or spiritually, and still feel a sense of calm that defies reason. That's what makes it miraculous. People around you may not understand it. They may ask why you aren't panicking, why you haven't broken down, why you still smile through your tears, and you may not even be able to explain it. But deep down, you know it's because God is with you. His presence carries a peace that cannot be explained by logic. It's not tied to your bank account, your health, your relationships, or the absence of trouble. It's rooted in the nearness of the one who holds all things together. This peace is often quiet. It doesn't shout or demand attention. It simply rests over you like a blanket on a cold night. It doesn't mean you're not hurting. It doesn't mean you're not aware of the difficulties around you. But it does mean that you are no longer afraid. You begin to sense that no matter what happens, you are not walking through it alone. You may feel uncertain about the future, but you are certain about one thing: God is near. And because of that, you can breathe, you can stand, you can keep going. It's in those quiet moments, when everything in the world tells you to fear and yet you feel peace, that you know something supernatural is at work. You begin to understand that true peace doesn't come from understanding everything, it comes from trusting the one who does. When you trust God, even the most chaotic situations begin to lose their power over you. Your faith begins to rise, not because the situation has changed, but because you have changed in the presence of God. The fear that once controlled you starts to fade. The anxiety that used to overwhelm you begins to loosen its grip. It's not that you've grown stronger, it's that you've grown closer to the source of all strength. When you welcome God into your life, you invite His peace, and His peace is powerful. It guards your heart and mind. It protects you from the lies of fear and despair. It reminds you that your life is in bigger hands than your own. It lets you rest, even when you feel like the weight of the world is pressing down on you. And this peace is not temporary. It doesn't fade when things get tough. In fact, it becomes more visible when life gets hard. That's what makes it miraculous. Anyone can feel calm when everything is going right. But when you feel peace in the middle of a storm, that's when you know it's God. So if you find yourself in a season of waiting, or pain, or confusion, and yet there's this unshakable stillness in your soul, pay attention. That's not ordinary, that's holy. That's the presence of God making Himself known in your life, and it's one of the clearest signs that He is near. You may not see a burning bush or hear a loud voice from the sky, but when peace comes that shouldn't be there, that's a miracle in itself. Lean into that peace. Don't brush it off. Don't second. Guess it. Let it remind you that you are not forgotten, not abandoned, not invisible. You are seen by the God who calms storms with a word and who calms your heart with His presence. And that kind of peace, it's worth everything, because when you have it, you begin to walk differently. You carry yourself with quiet confidence, not because life is easy, but because you know who walks with you. That's the miracle. That's the sign. When God is near, His peace will flood your heart, and you'll know deep down that you're held by something greater than this world. When God is near, healing and restoration begin to unfold in ways that are often unexpected, yet undeniably powerful. This isn't just about physical healing, though God certainly can and does perform miracles in the body. It's also about the kind of healing that touches the deepest parts of who you are, the places no one sees, the wounds no one knows about, the scars you carry silently every day. When God draws near, He doesn't just patch up broken pieces. He makes all things new. There's something sacred about the healing that happens in the presence of God. It's not forced, it's not rushed. It's gentle, patient, and perfectly timed. Some healing happens instantly. One moment you're in pain, the next you feel freedom. But more often, healing with God is a process, a slow, steady restoration of what was lost, stolen, or damaged. And in that process, you begin to realize that the very presence of God is healing in itself. You don't always need a dramatic moment. Sometimes, just sitting quietly in His presence is enough to begin the restoration of your soul. You may have carried wounds for years: rejection, betrayal, abandonment, grief, disappointment. And perhaps you've learned to live with the pain. You've learned to smile while hurting, to function while broken. But when God comes close, He doesn't let you settle for survival. He invites you into healing. He reaches into the hidden places of your heart and begins to do what no person, no therapy, no amount of time could ever truly do. He heals from the inside out. He speaks to the parts of you that have been silent for too long. He reminds you that you are not too far gone, not too damaged, not too broken to be restored. Sometimes healing means learning to trust again. Sometimes it means releasing unforgiveness or letting go of bitterness. Other times it means allowing yourself to feel again after years of numbness. And none of it is easy. But when God is near, you find strength to do what once felt impossible. You begin to believe that healing is possible, not because of who you are, but because of who He is. You begin to see yourself through His eyes, not as a victim, not as a failure, but as someone worthy of love, redemption, and a new beginning. Restoration goes even deeper than healing. Healing mends what was hurt, but restoration brings back what was lost. When God restores, He doesn't just fix, He rebuilds better than before. He restores joy, restores relationships, restores purpose. He gives back years that were wasted. He redeems situations that seemed beyond hope. When God is near, you begin to see things turn around. The same relationship that caused you pain can become a source of joy. The same area of weakness can become your greatest testimony. The very thing the enemy used to try to break you can become the platform God uses to bless you. And what's even more powerful is that healing and restoration often start on the inside before they manifest on the outside. Your circumstances may not change overnight, but something inside of you does. The heaviness begins to lift. The hopelessness begins to fade. You find yourself waking up with a little more strength, a little more clarity, a little more peace. That's God working in you. That's the slow, steady hand of the healer restoring what was broken. There's something unshakable about a person who's been healed by God. They carry a quiet confidence, a peace that can't be taken, because they know what it means to be restored. They've walked through the fire and come out refined. They've faced the darkness and found the light, and they carry a testimony not of their strength, but of God's faithfulness. If you're still waiting for your healing, don't lose heart. Just because you don't see the full picture yet doesn't mean it's not happening. Trust the process. Trust the one who is with you in it. Every tear, every prayer, every moment of surrender is part of the healing. And the fact that you're still standing, still hoping, still believing, that's a sign that healing has already begun. When God is near, healing is not just possible, it's inevitable. He doesn't come close without leaving a mark. He doesn't touch without transforming, and when he restores, he does it completely. Not halfway, not barely, fully, deeply, beautifully. That's the miracle of his presence. That's the promise of his love. And that's the hope we hold onto, that no matter how broken we feel, when God draws near, healing and restoration will follow, every time. When God is near, something begins to stir deep within the human heart, something that no circumstance, no human effort, and no worldly success could ever truly produce. It is a sense of joy and hope that rises not from what is happening around you, but from who is present with you. This joy and hope are not dependent on having everything figured out. In fact, they often appear in the most unexpected moments, in the middle of hardship, uncertainty, or loss. That's when you begin to realize that joy and hope are not emotions you manufacture. They are gifts that come alive when God draws close. There's a kind of joy that is not tied to laughter or good times, but rather to a deep awareness that God is walking with you. It's the kind of joy that wells up when you remember you are loved unconditionally, when you realize that your future is not limited by your past. This joy cannot be shaken by disappointment, because it's not built on temporary satisfaction. It's rooted in something eternal. When God is near, you begin to feel it even if you can't explain it. Even when your heart is heavy, even when life doesn't make sense, there's a current of joy underneath it all that keeps you going. That's not natural, it's supernatural. It's a sign of the nearness of God. Hope, too, begins to rise when God is present, not blind optimism, not wishful thinking, but true, living hope, the kind that gives you strength to believe that tomorrow can be better, even when today is hard. Hope that says, I don't know how, but I believe something good is coming. It's the kind of hope that anchors your soul in the promises of God, even when the waves of life are crashing all around you. It whispers that the story isn't over, that what's broken can be mended, that what's lost can be found. And that whisper becomes louder and clearer when you begin to draw near to God and feel his presence surrounding you. People may look at your life and see the struggle, the setbacks, the pain. But if they look a little closer, they will also see something else: the quiet joy in your eyes, the strength in your steps, the steady hope in your voice. These are not the results of positive thinking or sheer willpower. They are signs that God is with you, because when God is near, he brings light into the darkest places. He doesn't remove all the obstacles, but he fills you with something greater than your fear's joy, that doesn't depend on what's happening, and hope that doesn't fade when things go wrong. This joy and hope are often the very things that carry you through the hard times. They become your strength. They become your song in the night. And sometimes they are the only evidence you have that God is near, but they are more than enough, because they are not small things. They are miracles in themselves. To feel joy when you should be drowning in sorrow is a miracle. To feel hope when everything seems hopeless is a miracle. And these miracles are signs of a God who is near, who is working, who is loving you through every moment. You may not even notice at first. You may simply feel lighter one morning. You may find yourself smiling without a reason. You may catch yourself dreaming again after a long season of just trying to survive. These are not coincidences. These are the signs that the nearness of God is awakening something in you that had been buried: a childlike faith, a quiet confidence, a joyful expectation that something good is ahead. And that's what makes it miraculous, not because everything has changed around you, but because something has changed within you. This kind of joy and hope isn't loud or flashy. It doesn't need to be. It speaks softly but powerfully. It shows up in the way you choose to believe again, love again, trust again. It lives in the quiet moments where you say, God, I don't understand, but I know you're here. That's when joy rises. That's when hope grows, not because of circumstances, but because of presence, His presence. So if you find yourself in a place where joy and hope are beginning to rise again, don't ignore it. That's the evidence that God is near. That's the proof that He hasn't forgotten you. Let that joy grow. Let that hope strengthen. Because with God, no season of sorrow lasts forever, and no night is too dark for morning to come. When God is near, joy and hope are no longer just possibilities, they become your reality. And that is a miracle worth holding on to. When God is near, the miraculous does not always show up in dramatic or grand displays. More often, it appears in the quiet, simple moments of everyday life, moments that many might overlook, but that carry the unmistakable fingerprint of the divine. These are not coincidences or random acts of kindness. They are gentle signs that God is moving, guiding, and loving you in ways that are deeply personal and profoundly meaningful. When you are spiritually aware, you begin to recognize that these small moments are actually huge indicators of God's presence. You might be praying about something, feeling completely lost or uncertain, and then a friend calls at just the right time to say exactly what you needed to hear. You might be walking through a stressful situation and suddenly feel a wave of calm wash over you when there's no logical reason for it. These things don't happen by chance. They are little miracles, small nudges from heaven, that tell you, I'm here, I see you, I haven't left you. When God is near, He speaks in these subtle ways. He doesn't always split the sky open or shake the earth, but He shows up in the timing of events, in the words of a stranger, in the stillness of a moment. Sometimes it's as simple as waking up with clarity after a long night of confusion. Sometimes it's a door that opens after you've knocked for what felt like forever. Other times it's something as ordinary as a smile from someone who doesn't even know you, but somehow it feels like exactly what you needed. That's how God works. Through the ordinary, He brings the extraordinary. Through the natural, He reveals the supernatural. And when you're in tune with Him, your eyes start to open to this world of divine appointments and sacred interruptions. You begin to understand that nothing is random. Every detail, every encounter, every unexpected blessing is a piece of a larger picture that God is weaving together. That parking space you found when you were running late, that's not just luck. That comforting song that came on the radio at the perfect time, that's not a fluke. The sudden peace you felt when everything was falling apart, that's God. The world may not see it, but your heart knows it. These small miracles are how He reminds you that He's near. And the beauty of it is that once you start to recognize these moments, you begin to live differently. You become more grateful. You pay more attention. You begin to walk through life expecting to see God in the details. And when you expect to see Him, you do. That's faith in action, not just believing that God exists, but believing that He's active in your life, working all things together for your good. That mindset turns an ordinary day into a holy experience. You no longer wait for the big miracle because you realize the small ones are happening all around you. There's also a deep intimacy that forms when you recognize these simple signs of God's nearness. It feels personal, because it is. God knows you better than anyone. He knows what will speak to your heart. He knows how to comfort you in ways that are specific to your personality, your needs, your fears. And so He orchestrates these little signs to remind you of His care. He sends you reminders that you are not alone, not forgotten, not abandoned. These signs may not make headlines, but they are heaven sent. You might encounter someone who unknowingly answers a question you just asked God in prayer. You might open your Bible to a verse that feels like it was written just for you in that very moment. These are not coincidences. These are the ways God chooses to reveal Himself to those who are looking. When you are spiritually awake, you realize that God is speaking all the time, not always with a booming voice, but often with a quiet whisper in the rhythm of everyday life. So do not underestimate the power of the simple moments. Don't wait for thunder and lightning to know that God is near. Open your eyes to the beauty around you, to the timing that's too perfect to be chance, to the peace that comes from nowhere. That's where the miraculous lives. That's where God reveals himself to the hearts that are watching, waiting, and believing. When you recognize that even the small things are divine, your entire life becomes a testimony of God's presence. And that is one of the most miraculous signs of all. When God is near, guidance becomes clearer in ways that are both practical and profound. Life is full of decisions, crossroads, and uncertain paths, and often we find ourselves asking, which way should I go? In a world that is loud with opinions and distractions, the voice of God stands out, not always because it is loud, but because it is steady, pure, and unmistakably true. When God is close, his direction is not just information, but transformation. It's not just about choosing the right path. It's about becoming the kind of person who walks it with peace and purpose. You may have experienced seasons in your life where confusion clouded your mind, where no choice seemed right, and where fear of making the wrong move kept you frozen. But when God is near, something shifts. There is a calmness in your spirit, a clarity in your thoughts, and a sudden awareness of options you couldn't see before. God doesn't always give you a roadmap, but he gives you a compass. His Spirit guiding your heart, aligning your desires with his will. You start to sense when something is not quite right, and when something has his blessing. That sensitivity grows in his presence. His guidance isn't just about big life decisions like careers, relationships, or relocating. It also shows up in the daily, seemingly small choices. How you treat others, what you say, how you respond in conflict, and even what you spend your time and energy on. These choices, when directed by God, start to align with a greater plan. You begin to notice a consistency between what you feel called to do and what brings you true peace. That's not coincidence. That's God showing the way. His guidance has a signature: peace, clarity, humility, and alignment with truth. Sometimes his guidance comes through his word. You read a passage you've read 100 times before, but this time it leaps off the page and speaks directly to your situation. Sometimes it comes through prayer, not because God sends a lightning bolt answer, but because in his presence your mind clears and your spirit quiets. In that stillness, the answer becomes more obvious. Other times it comes through people, friends, mentors, or even strangers who unknowingly confirm what God has already whispered to your heart. That's the beauty of divine guidance. It's personal, but also communal. God uses the people around you to affirm what he is doing within you. And guidance doesn't always mean a straight, easy path. Sometimes God leads you into places that challenge you, stretch you, and grow you. But even then, you know he's guiding you because there is a peace in your heart that overrides the fear. You may not understand everything, but you trust the one who is leading. That trust becomes your anchor. Even when the steps don't make sense, his presence assures you that you're not walking blindly. You're walking faithfully. There are also times when God guides by closing doors. We often think of divine direction only in terms of open opportunities, but God is just as active in the no as he is in the yes. A closed door is not a punishment, it's protection. It's God redirecting your steps to something better, even if you don't see it yet. And when you are close to him, you learn to trust those closed doors just as much as the open ones. You begin to see rejection not as failure, but as divine redirection. Over time, the more you walk with God, the more familiar his guidance becomes. You recognize his voice, not always audible, but always unmistakable. You become less reactive and more discerning. You stop rushing into decisions and start waiting on his timing. And that waiting becomes easier because you've experienced the fruit of his direction. You've seen how he works things out for your good, even when the path seemed uncertain. In a world full of noise, the guidance of God is a miracle. It doesn't just help you make decisions. It shapes who you become. It grounds you in truth. It leads you toward purpose. And it reassures you that you are never alone in your journey. When God is near, you don't have to fear the unknown. You don't have to force your way forward. You simply walk with him one step at a time, trusting that he knows the way. Even when you don't, that is the miracle of divine guidance. That is the blessing of his nearness. When God is near, there is a powerful awakening within the soul that leads to a deeper sense of purpose and calling. Life suddenly shifts from being a random sequence of events to a journey filled with meaning. You begin to realize that you weren't just created to exist, to go through the motions, or to survive day after day without direction. No, you were made for something far greater, something eternal. When God draws close, He doesn't just comfort you, He calls you. He doesn't just bless you, He invites you to step into the reason you were born. It is in the presence of God that your true purpose begins to emerge. This awareness of purpose doesn't always come in a flash or a thunderous voice from the sky. Often it begins with a stirring in your heart, a restlessness that won't go away, a sense that there is more to life than what you've been living. And in God's presence, that restlessness finds direction. He begins to show you why you've been through what you've been through. The pain you've endured, the battles you've fought, the gifts you carry. They all start to make sense. God wastes nothing. Every part of your story, every chapter, whether joyful or difficult, becomes part of the calling He is placing on your life. You begin to sense that you are not an accident, not a mistake, not just another face in the crowd. You were created with intention. When God is near, He begins to remind you of that identity. He whispers to your heart that you have something to offer the world, something unique, something needed, and this is not about fame, success, or recognition. It's about impact, it's about obedience, it's about becoming who He made you to be so you can do what He made you to do. That's what calling is. It's not just a career path or a dream job. It's the divine assignment God places on your life for His glory and the good of others. Often, this sense of calling starts with small steps. Maybe you feel led to help someone in need, to speak a word of encouragement, to use your talents in a new way. And as you take those small steps, God begins to open doors. He aligns opportunities. He puts people in your path. He confirms your direction through peace, through scripture, through wise counsel. One thing leads to another, and suddenly you find yourself walking in a purpose you didn't fully understand at first, but now feels like exactly where you're meant to be. Walking in your calling doesn't mean life becomes easy. In fact, it often involves sacrifice, challenge, and faith. But the difference is that now, you know why you're doing what you're doing. You're no longer living for the approval of others or chasing things that leave you empty. You're living from a place of conviction, driven by something greater than yourself, and that kind of life brings a joy and fulfillment that the world cannot match. You start to wake up each day with a sense of direction, not because you have all the answers, but because you know the one who does. When God is near, He not only reveals your purpose, He equips you for it. He gives you the strength, the wisdom, and the resources you need. He prepares your heart and sharpens your character. He teaches you to rely on Him, not on your own abilities. And in doing so, He makes you capable of doing things you never thought possible. The very things that once scared you become the areas where His power shows up the strongest. You begin to live with courage, not because you're fearless, but because you trust the one who called you. There's something incredibly powerful about a life lived on purpose. It influences others, it inspires change, it brings light into dark places, and it all begins in the presence of God. That's where calling is birthed, where identity is affirmed, and where direction is made clear. You may not have every detail figured out, but when you're close to God, you walk with confidence, knowing that every step is ordered, every challenge is purposeful, and every moment is part of a divine plan. So if you feel that nudge, that stirring, that quiet voice calling you deeper, don't ignore it. Lean in, seek God, spend time in His presence, ask Him to reveal the purpose He has for you, and as you do, you'll find that life takes on a new dimension. You'll no longer be drifting, you'll be driven, not by pressure or pride, but by purpose. And that, more than anything, is the miraculous result of God being near. He calls, He equips, and He leads you into the life you were always meant to live. When God is near, one of the most profound signs that begins to unfold in a person's life is the transformation of their character. This isn't about becoming religious or simply appearing morally upright. It's about a deep internal change that reshapes who you are at the core. When the presence of God begins to saturate your life, things that used to control you start to lose their grip. Habits that once defined you start to fall away. Bitterness, pride, anger, lust, fear, Those inner struggles that held you back begin to weaken under the weight of divine love. You begin to sense that you're not just being improved, you're being renewed. Something inside you is being made new. This kind of transformation doesn't happen through human strength or willpower alone. Many try to change their behavior, to fix their flaws, or to become better people, only to fall back into old patterns. But when God is near, He doesn't just modify your behavior. He changes your heart. He reaches into the deepest, most hidden parts of you and begins to heal what's broken, cleanse what's unclean, and strengthen what's weak. You might not even notice it at first, but over time others will. They'll see the difference in your patience, your kindness, your integrity. They'll see the peace in your eyes, the grace in your speech, the love in your actions. And you'll know without a doubt that it's not because of you. It's because God is near. The process isn't instant. It's a journey. Sometimes it's slow and subtle, and sometimes it's radical and immediate. But it always starts with surrender. When you open your heart and invite God in, His Spirit begins to work in you. He doesn't force change, He cultivates it. He speaks through conviction, not condemnation. He shows you who you are, not to shame you, but to grow you. And as you spend time in His presence, as you pray, as you read His Word, as you learn to listen, that transformation takes root. Your desires begin to change. You start to want what He wants. You begin to see the world through His eyes. You may find yourself forgiving people who hurt you, even when they don't apologize. You may find yourself walking away from things that once tempted you, not out of fear, but out of love. You may find yourself speaking life instead of gossip, choosing peace instead of retaliation, showing compassion instead of judgment. These are not small changes. They are miracles of the heart. They are the evidence that God is near. Because left to yourself, those changes would be impossible. But with Him, they become your new reality. This character transformation also begins to affect every area of your life, your relationships, your work, your choices. You start to treat people differently because you see them as God sees them. You become more honest, more responsible, more humble, more generous. You begin to carry a sense of purpose that makes you dependable and trustworthy. People may not be able to explain it, but they'll feel the difference. They'll feel God through you. Your life becomes a reflection of His love, His mercy, His truth. And the beautiful part is that this transformation doesn't make you perfect. It makes you real. You become more aware of your weaknesses, but also more confident in God's strength. You stop pretending and you start walking in authenticity. You're not afraid to admit your need for God because you've seen what He can do with a surrendered heart. You know you're still a work in progress, but you also know who's doing the work, and He is faithful to complete it. Over time, you'll look back and barely recognize the person you used to be, not because you've become someone else, but because you've become who you were always meant to be. That's what happens when God is near. He doesn't just change your situation, He changes you. And that kind of transformation is one of the clearest, most undeniable signs of His presence. Because no amount of willpower or motivation can produce the kind of heart change that the Spirit of God brings. It's a miracle, it's a testimony, and it's a sign that the God of heaven is not only with you, but within you, shaping you from the inside out. When God is near, everything changes, not always in thunderous, dramatic ways, but often in the quiet, powerful unfolding of His presence in our lives. The signs of His nearness are not just miracles in the sky, but miracles in the soul. Peace that defies understanding, clarity in the midst of confusion, simple moments filled with divine timing, doors that open, hearts that heal, strength that rises from weakness, and a sense of purpose that begins to shape everything you do. His nearness is not a feeling. It's a reality that transforms your thoughts, your relationships, your future. And once you've tasted it, once you've walked in it, you can never go back to life as it was before. Because when God is near, you don't just live, you come alive. You don't just survive, you walk in victory. These signs are not just for the chosen few. They are for anyone willing to draw near, to listen, to follow. If you open your heart, if you seek Him, you will find Him. And when you do, these miraculous signs will follow, not as random blessings, but as proof that the God of all creation is with you, for you, and working in you.